Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roxbury Community College. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Jonathan Jefferson, and I am the president of Roxbury Community College. Thank you. So I'd like to start by thanking the Globe's Wealth, Power, and Inequity team for hosting tonight's critical discussion at our. Some interesting things happening here on the college. Right in Building 3, we're having a discussion about how the citizenry can move democracy forward. And here we're talking about wealth, and the two are very much correlated because one thing that does need to be democratized is wealth distribution within this company. I believe that this is the third panel discussion we've hosted at RCC this year, and each discussion has been deep and meaningful for the greater community. You can hold these discussions anywhere, but the fact that you're holding them here at Roxbury Community College means so much to us. We believe this is the home of civic discussion, discourse, controversy, and ways and activism. As you know, if the Commonwealth had its way over 50 some odd years ago, there will be a highway running. But the fact that you are here tonight represents that you are a portion of the best highway that can ever been here. That is the engine for economic and social mobility for the citizenry of Black Boston, Boston, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we appreciate that. And when I go off script, I have to find out where my notes are. When I read through the articles resulting from this summer small group conversation, it was unfortunately all too familiar, the stories that they told. The desires to build wealth, not just for the sake of doing so, but to have a better, more fulfilling life, is the desire of every RCC student. Our students are here because they want economic mobility, and I strongly believe that RCC is poised to provide every student with the education and training needed to live, work, and thrive in the communities in which they live. When we're talking about wealth, and we're talking about the wealth gap, and we're talking about bridging that gap, we're talking about building wealth, there are a couple of things that you have to look at. Some of the poorest people in the Commonwealth live in this area. The wealth gap is horrendous. The health equity gap, 23 years. To put that mildly, if you are 83 years old in Beacon Hill and you die, a 57-year-old is dying in Nubian Square. Now, if you, like me, you're older than 57 years old, and you hope that you live as long as you are going to live, but certainly you don't want to die young. So looking at these gaps are very, very important. The other statistics I want you to know is that today, a Black man with an associate's degree makes less than a white man with a high school diploma. What's wrong with that picture? Particularly when we just released the state numbers that says that if you get a higher education, that you are more likely but the difference between a high school diploma and an associate's degree is $20,000 a year after 5 years, $30,000 for a bachelor's degree, and $40,000 plus with a master's degree. We've got a wealth gap issue that we must address. I look forward to hearing more stories, to hearing more about the interviews and the concrete solutions from tonight's esteemed panel. For now, I'd like to take a moment to highlight a few initiatives at RCC. RCC Center for Internship and Career Services is leading RCC's transformation into what we call a career-ready work college. Integrating paid employment opportunities into the curriculum is the secret sauce that we are ensuring for every single one of our graduates so they're positioned to becoming a thriving, tax-paying citizen of the Commonwealth. Especially at the community college level, it's all too common for students to hold part-time jobs unrelated to their career goals, struggle to make ends meet, and try to find time for their studies. I'm working with my leadership team to transform RCC into this college where every student can participate in a paid internship, externship, or student employment, positioning them for real-world experience in a growing field. I want to make earning and learning relevant, and I want it to lead to high-paying jobs for our students. I'm not going to read the rest of this. This is probably one of the most important discussions that we're going to have in the remaining of this year. Let's be open, let's be honest, let's figure out solutions, let's figure out ways to close the wealth gap. Remember that when you're thinking about college students, there are 3 things that college students worry about all the time. Do I have a place to live? Do I have transportation? And do I have enough food to eat? These are the things, the fundamental things that people need to have, and they're the foundational building blocks to begin to think about building wealth and creating generational wealth for everyone. Have a great time. I'm going to apologize right now. I wanted to stay for this discussion and for the next discussion, but I have to catch a flight at 0:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, I have to go deal with a family emergency. So those of you who whisper a prayer, whisper one for me. Those who have think deep thoughts, good thoughts, think deep and good thoughts for me. I would very much appreciate it. Have a happy holiday, because I will not be back. Have a happy holiday, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. There you go.
Thank you so much. You guys go on the front, right? Because I'm sitting. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Johnston. I'm a reporter and editor at The Globe. And I think we're going to play a short video, and then we'll introduce the rest of the panelists.
We asked 150 Bostonians about wealth and financial security. This is what they told us.
Although you've got a lot more rich folks have moved into the neighborhood, okay, the way it plays out is that they have louder voices than people from the community.
When you look at the beauty, but under the beauty, it's a lot of social ills that have come to light.
The local bodegas that used to be in the corner are now condo buildings and high rises.
The housing issue has been an issue with me for over 44 years.
Neighbors don't even know each other anymore. There's no such thing as the neighborhood because the neighbors are gone.
The Boston Globe, I think, is where I read that you need about $135,000, $140,000 a year to be able to obtain your starter home.
Wealth of the average black family is $8 in comparison to that of a white family, which is about $250,000. That's so severe.
Would definitely worth more than $8.
There's no quick fix. There's no just quick turnaround for it.
One of the biggest barriers in my life is to see the suffering that's going on, and particularly in the black community as relates to income, inequality, opportunities, and so forth.
Sería muy importante empezar por saber que existe y que te afecta de una manera muy tangible en tu día a día.
And when I say more conversations, structured conversations around what is wealth to me, to my neighbor.
It just feels like the system doesn't want you to get out of poverty.
My family, you know, the community I live in, my health, and right now that I'm wealthy that way.
Your health is your wealth, and it didn't mean anything to me until I got in my 50s and my health started changing.
To me, wealth is understanding how I can make a change or how I'll use my knowledge to implement it to other people and how to help them implement that to what they want to do.
To me, wealth is really doing the work that doesn't just benefit you, but benefits others.
I think that a true definition of wealth that differentiates from money is the fact that although money is involved, it's really the long-term management of money.
I think this project, Money, Power, Inequality, can bring to light some of the inequities that's going on, and to hear voices of those that you don't typically hear from. You typically hear from those community leaders and our government officials and CEOs, but to hear from people that are on the ground, those in the barrels, those that are under the barrel, I think that's important.
The solutions to most of our problems are political in nature. You don't get involved in the process, you get left behind.
All right, so we're also happy to be here to talk about this really important topic tonight. Ron, why don't you start? Introduce yourself. Go down the row.
Sure.
Hello? Green light.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Bell. I'm the lead organizer for the RealTalk Network, as well as the executive director and founder of Dunk the Vote.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. All right. It's good to be with you this evening, and thanks for coming out for what is going to be a great conversation. My name is Ron Dorsey, and I'm the president and CEO at the Eastern Bank Foundation.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm Lorna Rivera. I'm a professor at the College of Education and Human Development at UMass Boston, and I'm also the director of the Gaston Institute for Latino Community Development and Public Policy. And I want to throw out there, too, that I am on the board for the Latino Equity Fund at the Boston Foundation, and the work that we're doing there is really about generating wealth. So I hope we can bring that back into the convo later. Thank you.
Good evening, Glenn Lloyd, local resident up the street. I am the current executive director of Nectar Community Investments, which is a community development finance institution that does lending out to small businesses and homeowners, and a few other things in the community over the years.
Okay, so before we start with the panel, I want to tell you all a little bit more about the project that brought us here. So the Boston Globe partnered with the RealTalk Network to learn more about people's experiences of wealth and financial well-being in underserved communities around Boston. So RealTalk organized a series of 26 conversations last summer involving 150 community members. And the conversations were led by trained moderators, and participants talked about a whole range of things: financial hardship, gentrification and displacement, the need to learn more about saving and investing, and a lot of them talked about a real hunger they had for the financial freedom to spend more time with loved ones. The conversations were recorded and analyzed for common themes, and then the Globe uploaded 700 snippets of these conversations onto a website that is available beyond the paywall, and I think you guys all have a link to it or will be forwarded it. And they're searchable by neighborhood and theme, and it's really interesting, and there's a lot there. And I wanted to play you a couple of examples. So I think we have one queued up now to listen to.
It's almost as if when you talk about how do we make Roxbury wealthier, it's almost like people want to laugh.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, the way is when the new people come in, they'll be wealthy, right? And you won't.
Okay, they cut off the end there. She says, they'll be wealthy and you won't be here. So there was just so many really deep insights of people who've lived in these communities for a long time and what they've experienced, and it was really eye-opening for a lot of us. We also ran a story about the project and the conversations and created a wealth-building guide that I think will be handed out to everyone tonight. And the idea behind it was to shed a big, bright light on what people in Boston are experiencing when it comes to wealth or lack thereof. Many of them were lower income residents of color who aren't often featured in the media or in the Globe. And through events like this, we're hoping to expose the barriers causing financial inequities and highlight ways that we can lift people up. And by putting a greater focus on these issues, we hope to better reflect and learn from the lives of the people around us. And that brings us to have a stronger and healthier community. So I really keyed in on one of the conversations. It was in August 6th in Roxbury, including the woman who just spoke, Laura. And I ended up calling a few of them for the story. And so here's another clip from Debbie, who was also in the story that I wrote.
But my question is, why is it so difficult for us as Black folks to pool our funds to build our own community institutions? My lived experience has been being the financier of everything and everybody. All I have is a pocket full of IOUs, a folder full of IOUs that never will get.
It will never be paid back, is what she said there, the pocket full of IOUs. And then there's one more quote that I wanted you guys to hear from Leslie.
Why haven't I done everything that I should have done to protect my property and my legacy? I'm too busy taking care of everybody else. And that's my lived experience. I have been the pocketbook, caretaker,
Now you're taking
healer of everyone else.
Right.
And so Ron Bell was the driving force behind organizing these conversations. And I wondered if you could say a few words about what stood out for you about the conversations.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you and the Boston Globe for partnering with us in this distinguished panel. I'm really excited. I have relationships with some of the folks on this panel. Well, let me just stop by giving you a little snippet of what we started the RealTalk Network in 2021 during the pandemic. Caesar McDowell, Associate Director of the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, came and got me. He hired me to bring the grassroots with the technology tools, all the stuff I don't understand about the computers and all that stuff. And I went out and recruited some trusted organizers, Zakia Lockie, who's with us, and a number of other folks that I know that can get the job done. Fast forward, Caesar had told me that Chris Hooks, who's walking in the door, I believe, right now, Chris, how you doing, Chris? Chris is on paternity leave. I don't want to put him out there like that, but he and I actually built a relationship, and this has been basically the program has been built on relationship. The Globe came with us with the Money, Power, and Equality, which Chris runs the program, and it was really getting folks to talk about their issues and their financial well-being. And it was really exciting because you heard from Judge Leslie Harris, some of you know that we had lost him. It was just good to reconnect with people that I haven't seen in years. And we know that Boston's a cold city. And I'm not talking about the weather like it is tonight. We don't talk to each other. And so out of the conversations, it was a hunger to get people in the room together, to talk to one another, and to see the similarities that we all share about our wealth.
That's great. Go ahead.
I could say a lot more, but I'm not going to take all the oxygen.
All right, okay. So we asked everyone in these conversations to answer the same 3 questions to start it off. So I thought we would start the panel by having each of you answer these questions also. So the questions were, and Ron will have you start. The questions were, what does wealth mean to you? What's a question you have about your own financial well-being? And what is a personal experience that relates to that question? And this was really a way to get people to open up and talk about personal stories and get people to connect to each other, and it works amazingly well.
Wealth means to me is to be prosperous and in good health. And particularly, my health is my wealth. In March 30th in 2011, while I served as a senior advisor to Governor Deval Patrick, I had a massive heart attack. And a few months afterwards, I had another heart surgery. That bill totaled over $100,000. Co-payment was about $5,000. Just recently, I just had another health scare, and when I was watching the television, watching the government shutdown, and I kept thinking to myself, if I didn't get government subsidies, I can literally go bankrupt. That's the thought that was going through my mind, even though I was nervous as anything, as far as, the diagnosis and everything. But my question is, what financial decisions I would have to make as far as cuts if the government subsidies are not renewed? That's my question.
Okay.
You don't need to answer it.
No, I don't have an answer.
Because I know the Globe got money, but...
I don't. All right, Ron, why don't you go? Other Ron.
Sure. So I think when I think about wealth, for me, it's enough abundance. And it's whether it's for me personally or collectively as well, because everything I need doesn't need to sit in my bank account or in my household. And in fact, I think if we're trying to build the communities that we say we desire, it can't work that way. It can't be what we hoard at each of our addresses. For me, the enough part matters because I don't need it all. If my relationship to resources is unhealthy and I think I need all of it, then I'm contributing to the disparity. I'm contributing to these folks not having something because I think I need all of it. But the abundance is important, and why it's important for me is it gives me the freedom to kind of live my life's mission at some level. I can give without worry and without much consideration, which is something that I want to do. I want the freedom to be able to do that. I can take risks. I think for me to be better, for all of us to be better, some risks need to be taken, and I need to sometimes take a loss and sometimes benefit from the gain. But I think if you're worried because you don't have enough excess and abundance, the risk magnifies the opportunity to do anything. And when you're called on, because we're all called on to step up for somebody else, then there are heart palpitations. There's anxiety because you want to step up. You don't know how. You don't know if you have enough. And that's a scary place to be. I think for me, it was about, I saw my family living those values, but I also saw what I think was a healthy relationship to money growing up. I grew up, relatively middle class in Detroit, Michigan, which, I may say some other things about Detroit tonight, but because I love that city. But a very different social contract that really kind of said to you in a manufacturing economy, there is going to be fair compensation and support for an honest day's work. And for that to be said in a city that's like 80% black folks, it created a class of wealth and prosperity that really has looked very different than the rest of America. That, and we can talk about this, is not Boston's social contract. And I want to be clear that we're going to talk about choices, personal responsibility, and some other things. Economic hardship is not a personal choice challenge. It's a structural problem. So we need to talk about the structural problems. We all make mistakes with money or whatever, but that does not explain economic disparity. Structural challenges explain that. So, the question that I always kind of sit with is, when are we going to be brave enough to write the social contract that includes everybody?
Thank you. I love it. I think I agree with what Ron and even some of the folks have said already, that, you're wealthy if you're healthy, right? But whether you're healthy depends on, where you're born, your income, your education, your access to that health care, your child care. So, kind of what public health folks call like the social determinants of health. They're also like the social determinants of wealth. So I often think about that from my own family as well. health issues personally and my family. I have a son that's disabled. I'm a single mom, and my parents are migrants from Puerto Rico. So I grew up, receiving AFDC welfare and going to public schools. And so I also think that to that question about, my question is, if education is part of that social contract, and education is supposed to be that equalizer and to provide that economic mobility, what are we doing with our public education in this country and in this city? So, as an educator, I really see personally how public schools, got me where I am. I'm in a public, I'm at a public university, and I'm really worried about cuts in the federal level of the Department of Education and how that's going to trickle down, and what opportunities will there be for my son and for our children in our city and beyond.
Yeah, good point. Glenn.
I think the question is, what does wealth mean to myself? I use this analogy, which is, when they're on the plane, they say when the oxygen piece comes down, put oxygen mask on yourself first before you can help others beside you. And so for me, it kind of starts with that. Like, you look at yourself like, okay, can I take care of myself? Can I support myself? And then obviously, can I support my family? And then it ripples from there. Is, can I support and help build my community? And you have the ability to do that in that succession, I think that's, for me, part of the definition of wealth.
Great, okay. Well, let's talk about the entrenched structural barriers facing a lot of people, and particularly Black and brown people, that inhibit their ability to build wealth, and how that impacts the ability to make and save and pass down money. You guys have thoughts on some of those structural barriers?
Well, maybe I'll start since I get the mic over here.
Yeah, you guys are the financial experts. I just want to make that clear,
I really want to try to keep it as positive as possible, right? Because we start with these conversations on what we don't have, and I think we have a lot of power among ourselves. I want to start with that. But also, you can't not have this conversation with not taking into consideration of where we sit historically, right? And so, my ancestry, was owned. We weren't the owner, right? And then another part of my ancestry, on the indigenous side, was the land was taken, right? And so and that's generational over there. It leads to the situation where it isn't a level playing field for a lot of our folks. But what I say is you start with what power you have as an individual, and whoever you talk to, we are living in this capitalist system, right? And it starts with what you can start saving and accumulating yourself, right? I'll say, when I was prepping for this conversation today, there's a thing called compound interest. We all know what that is. And the beautiful thing about compound interest, it works well over time. And so if you take your kind of average interest rate right now, around 4 or 5%, and you invest it, you invest $1, $1,000, or whatever that is, you'll double that money in 7 years. And then that money will double again 7 years from now. And so I don't know about folks on this panel or folks in the audience, but that was never taught me, right? This whole thing about financial literacy and how money works, it came to me late in life. And the reality is, if you start early on this, you have a better chance of accumulating wealth earlier. And not to mention all the challenges that a lot of our community faces, but we have to be like special forces, right? Because the opportunities, are more challenged and so on and so forth. So, so one of the things I just want to, make sure I impart tonight, which is, how do we increase our ability to build assets? And it starts with that first piece of saving, right? Whatever, $85 a week put aside turns into $1,000 a year, and you put that type of stuff aside, it builds over time. And I can get into the whole other piece around a lot of the first step of the wealth ladder is home ownership. So how do we make sure that we move how do we move from rental to owning our own home? And then the really how folks really make money in the society is owning equity, right? Owning parts of businesses, owning stocks, and so on and so forth. And so we can get into all those details, but I think the reality is understanding how finances work and where you can play, how you play the game yourself, so that you're actually, building your assets is the first beginning of trying to, get your foot on that ladder, the first step of the ladder.
Ron, you want to add?
A couple of thoughts. I want to stick with this theme of the social contract and just say that, historically, the creation of the middle class is really about public policy intervention, public subsidy, private subsidy from employers, and wage protection largely by unions. That's the story of the middle class in America. So the New Deal through the 30s, which more or less creates modern health care support, Social Security, and some other things. You move on to the GI Bill, which basically creates mass home ownership in the American suburbs. And then the evolution of unionization throughout that time, which kind of pushed towards employer benefits like health care and some other pieces. Those same tools that created the middle class were the same tools that excluded Black and brown folks and indigenous folks and women from participating in that social contract. They were the same, it was the same ink that wrote those folks out of the social contract. So what it then means is that, flash forward to 2025, if we aren't protecting the wages of all workers and building career ladders where you can earn increased income for job performance, now I've got a hard time earning $40,000 to $50,000, even figuring out where to begin in Boston, where the estimate is that you need 6 figures to even kind of start a life here. If we aren't going to subsidize in a high-cost economy mortgage down payment and some other things, the starter home is taken off of the table in this economy. If we aren't going to say, look, we're going to make early education and care a public good, the public sector and employers combining their capital to make sure that early education and care are free for families in a place where it costs you $20,000 a year to make sure that one child, 0 to 5, is well taken care of and well educated, you can't get the right start. But we can, in one of the wealthiest parts of the country, make the decision that this is going to be the social contract to do these things. It's not to say that we won't have to sacrifice other things that we've become accustomed to, but we have to make some agreements about what we want to provide for one another. What we can't say, and I will say this is disheartening for me sometimes when I sit at tables where we talk about the regional wealth gap, we kind of stare at the problem and say we don't have enough to do anything about this. I absolutely don't believe that.
Great, okay. You want to
Yeah, I didn't mention this earlier, but there was a judge who participated in our conversations, and one of the things I realized is that you can't judge a book by its cover, and he had mentioned that he did not have an estate. I was like, whoa, you're a judge and you don't have an estate. And his reasoning was because he didn't trust folks who did not look like him. He was African American, and we know the powers that be. So he said, I just don't trust anyone, and I just don't have one.
I mean, and are there ways to build that trust? How do you accomplish that?
I think trust is built by relationships, which is what's key about this project. We got to know each other. Some of us have been friends for over 30 years, and again, people are hungry to talk to each other now, especially after the pandemic. So I think that trust can be built, but it takes time. And we've been conditioned as African Americans, Black folks, not to trust people. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
don't look at me.
how do you
No,
change
you
that
never
mindset,
lied.
right? Like that's so ingrained, like you said, that seems
You work
difficult to
at it.
overcome. Well, let's talk.
Because you know the other thing, even with the relationship with the Globe and MIT, institutions that have not treated our communities that well. And
Don't be turning
sorry,
against
don't be
us,
talking
Ron.
about the Boston Globe. Okay. No, that's something that, Chris, as I mentioned, it took us 6 months going back and forth. And I was like, I don't know. I got to talk to my people. I love black people. I love Latinos. I love people, right? Even sometimes they don't love me back. But the bottom line is that it has to be built over time because of, the way things are.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the predatory businesses and practices that are often seen in low-income communities and can really get people into a cycle of debt. Payday loans, merchant cash advances. Lorna, do you want to talk about why are these services used and how do they exploit people?
Yeah, I was, when we were preparing for this panel, I was talking about how when I was growing up through high school, I worked full-time, and I worked in a currency exchange, check cashers. And there's a lot of those in Boston as well. And those are really where you get exploited to, no end, because there's, folks that aren't able to get checking accounts, maybe because they don't have a social security number. There's that trust issue, right? But it's not just about the convenience, it's also, they provide these other services, and at least they used to, and provide even bail bonds. They finally outlawed that in 2021. But there's these, you have a personal check and they'll charge you more for a personal check to cash that out of, a certain percentage. If, everything is like these fees, right? They will even, check cashing agencies and currency exchanges, as they're called, will also even do the EBT for you. They'll also do electronic, they'll make you deposit, if you do have checks, they'll deposit it through the currency exchange, and then they'll take the interest off of that, right? So there's this whole, why do we allow for that to continue, these kinds of businesses, when we know that they can exploit people like this? And people, if there was more of that financial literacy, right, we could really demonstrate the benefits, right, where you can get free checking accounts with, no minimum payments. There's ways that we could, address some of that. But I do think that, there is a lot of these exploitative practices that, we really need to address in our communities.
Yeah, I think you mentioned merchant cash advances, and first let me just say, from a small business side, a lot of our folks, as the wealth gap shows, are starting at their balance sheet's a little bit weaker, right? So there's less cash, and so they say when a cold, when challenges hit our community, it's stronger for our small businesses. And this is another tool that, when you look at DoorDash and Toast, some of these folks who have access to your sales, these small businesses sometimes get themselves in cash challenges, and they pull cash from these MCA, they call them MCAs, and they're extremely expensive, and there's a lot of fine print. And if you get yourself behind, they literally have shut down businesses in our community. And so it's not only the CDFI world has found this to be a problem, but the banking world is saying, wait a second, we're seeing more and more of this predatory on our small business owners. And then you start questioning yourself, what's, why am I allowing this stuff to happen? And it's structural, it's institutional. So, part is, again, that's the problem. Now, how do we get to the solution to this, right? How do we get cash to our folks who are running legitimate businesses so they don't have to take advantage of these predatory options? So this is just another example of it's almost like it's like check cash for our business owners that folks don't know it's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, and going along with that, like people are often more focused on surviving than on investing their money, right, and growing it. So how do you change that mindset if people are working 2 jobs, taking care of kids, taking care of family members, maybe living in a high crime neighborhood? I mean, how do you get people to stop and take the time to try and grow their money?
Reparations. I mean, we are so far behind. I mean, I think about folks that go to the check cashers, right? When you're broke, and you don't care about no expenses. You don't think about that. You're trying to survive. And so when you talk about investing, that's not even a thought. You're trying to make ends meet. And then you become, and if you make a lot of money, like some of the folks on this panel, I won't call any names, but if you make, you become an ATM. You become an ATM, and they think you got it going on. Right, Glenn?
I got a few calls, Ron. I got a few calls. Yeah.
And Ron.
What do I want to say about this? So one, take broad perspective, because I don't want people to reduce themselves to money. Your time is valuable, your effort is valuable, your expertise is valuable, and there are returns on a lot of that. There's a lot of opportunity to be created through the relationships, like Ron said, that you build. They pay out over time, they pay out differently, and some other things. Where the money itself is concerned, some of it is just about discipline and doing what you can. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a teenager, one of my mentors said to me, "You're going to open up a mutual fund." Kind of didn't really know what it was. I trusted him, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to open up a mutual fund." His assumption was I was going to be diligent about putting money into it every month or whatever. I wasn't. But what it did for me was, as soon as I put my little $50 into this mutual fund or whatever, I started reading the stock page every day. I wanted to understand what the paper was printing. I wanted to follow my fund to see what it was doing. Now, I didn't remember after I made this investment in June to put more money in July, but when I did, I put more money in. Flash forward a few more years, that $50 turns into a couple of $1,000s. It's not a windfall, but there were a lot of lessons in there and a lot of insights and just practice. And it was low stakes. Amen. I didn't have to put money in every month. I didn't, and I could only do what I could do with my little summer job at the time and whatever else. But the practice was important. And so, I would say whatever it is you can do, the jar, the swear jar, whatever you do at your house, put it in there for now. And put it in with a purpose. Ask yourself, what do I want to do with this if and when it accumulates? Because the goal is also important, because that kind of gives you some measure for how fast you want to get there and how much it's going to take. And I think it incentivizes your effort. But also think about what we should be investing together. I'm going to tell them a quick story, Glenn. So Brother Glenn Lloyd and I and our families and some friends co-own a farm. There were a lot of reasons to do this. I'll tell you my reason. Like, I was working like a dog for a long time. I was like, I need a second home. And my wife is like, ain't no way you ever gonna have a second home. But when we got 10 friends together who said we're interested in being property owners together, we need to figure out the calendar, but now and then I can say, when I'm tired, I'm going to drive up there. The other thing that happened, though, is that it added to the abundance because, there's the abundance of the relationships, which is magnificent, but we grow 2,000 pounds of food a year. So we eat off the land and we give a lot of the food away. But it was the time investment. It was the investment in the friendships. We wouldn't have been here if Glenn hadn't said to me, you've been talking about this for a while, and your wife's been talking about this for a while. Can we have a conversation and figure out what it's going to look like?
Yeah, I love that.
Just follow up on that, because I think I'm glad Ron brought that up, because we've inherited, we've inherited the system, and it definitely like rewards individuals to like get more and more and more. And when we talk about, I think one way to rethink of things, how do we think about collective ownership? And so, Ron just talked about there's 10 families that collectively own this farm. And I'm actually really proud of some stuff that's recently happened with a company that I helped found, which is City Fresh Foods, of which we offered shares to the folks who helped build the company. And now the company is 40% owned by the employees that work there. And so we really, this is the stuff that we have to be thinking, differently. And just for reality, like, it's also about how you share the profits, right? And so people think, Ron, you talked about like Ron Bell. I have to say, you got two Rons up here. You know what I'm saying? Is, you don't really know what's really happening behind the scenes. You got to really dig to get a better sense. So I'll be completely transparent. We're in a low margin business, food service, right? You know that low margin means $1 comes in as revenue, and if a good year is 3 or 4% profit on that, right? And so that's 97% of that stuff is going to expenses, all the stuff, right? We're paying our people, we're paying for the food and all that other fun stuff. But of the dip now of that, 3 or 4 or 5%, we share that profit with the team. And so now they're getting real checks. And so, and not only are they getting checks, but they're owners. So if we ever sell the company, they get a piece of that too. And so I just want to say, and that's how we have to be thinking about how we think about collective ownership, not only on the farmland, but also with our businesses.
Thank you for that. I did want to add, it's a little different idea here, but, because the question was also about, sometimes it's like, poor people, they spend all their money on, consumer products and things, and they're not saving. But what I know also happens, at least in the Latino community, is we send a lot of money back to our home countries. So those remittances could be staying here. And, I remember my father won the lottery. Like, it was like $10,000. But that was a lot of money. What did he do? He sent it all to Puerto Rico. And, that helped our family, obviously. But, there's that sort of sense of we're going to take care of others as well. It's not individualistic that way. And then, our churches. Lots of evangelicals in my family, and they take like 15% of your paycheck, some of these smaller, churches. And so I just wonder, we have a little bit, but we're giving it, to the church or to our families abroad, and how do we sort of make priorities there differently? And I know I'm sounding very judgy here, but I think, we do give. Right? We do give. We share with our families. But, again, it's sort of how do we prioritize that? And some of these churches are a little exploitative, too.
Is that 15% tithe?
Yeah, there's more in some churches.
Well, it used to be 10%.
They're going up.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about some more like accessible, achievable strategies that exist for building wealth. Do you guys have thoughts on, 1 or 2 tips or things you would do to try and start on the journey to building more wealth?
I think today we're doing it now. I think we're having a conversation about wealth, which we normally don't. And to bring to really change the civic infrastructure, bottom up, hearing from the experts on the ground. I think that's a good way to start. We couldn't do everything in 1 hour or 2 hours tonight. We're going to be holding monthly seminars and conversations ongoing, provided that we get the funding. Provided that we get the funding, right? But no, seriously, because our community is in need, and I think it's important that we talk about wealth. One of the things I didn't say about the conversation, everyone was talking about how they wanted to have generational wealth for their children, and it was really a lot of similarities in them conversations about people wanting to get their lives together and to really develop estate planning and to financial literacy and all the things. So we're going to be doing that. So visit us at RealTalkNetwork.org if you're interested in participating in the conversation and learning more about financial literacy.
Yeah, no, I think I started earlier about some specifics around taking a small pieces of, if you can start saving a little bit, and I think the general understanding on investment strategy is index funds, just put in more, as much as possible, as early as possible, and let that roll in terms of your your individual, how do you kind of build some assets, and then obviously, we chatted about home ownership. There's some interesting things happening. There's a local CDC that is doing this program of down payment assistance, which, by the way, like, how much does it cost to buy a house around nowadays in our neighborhood? We're like just sub $1 million, right? I mean, you can't, right? It's crazy. So 20% down on that, we all know the math, right? That's a lot of money coming out the pocket. We don't have that kind of cash. And so what they're doing is they're saying, look, if you're living in Boston, we're going to grant a chunk of that down payment, and it will be relieved over the course of 7 years. Like, that's the stuff we got. So I guess part of the stuff is policy. Like we can do individual stuff, and then we got to overlay it with some serious policy to really get. I think the Boston Foundation is doing some interesting stuff too with down payment assessment. That's smart stuff. So now we get some ownership going. And I can go on longer on some of the stuff that the city's done with the Welcome Home program, and they did about, I don't know, there's 9 emerging developers creating about 500-600 units that are going to be available for home ownership. So that's the stuff we gotta double down on. And then, obviously, I mentioned reimagining even business and who owns these businesses at the end of the day, so that we're locally owning our own ability to feed ourselves, provide energy for ourselves, provide water for ourselves, and all that stuff. So that to me is, I think, where every crisis and craziness, there's opportunity to really rethink and come up with new ways of doing things.
Let's stick with the structural and some of what Glenn brought up. I think we need to explore scaling universal or basic income, guaranteed basic income. Let me not necessarily say universal. I've got a lot of comments about that, although it could be. But let me first say, on a more targeted basis, if we're creating an economy that we know is going to automate and AI people out of jobs, guaranteed income could make sure that we've got transitional income for folks who need to upskill, reskill, will be on the bench for a while. We actually produce enough, and actually we've achieved an economy that almost cyclically requires fewer people to produce profit. The profits are at an all-time high by some measures, at least historically. We need fewer people. We can still take care of those people even if they aren't in our offices every day. But that's a larger cultural conversation about who deserves resource and who doesn't. So we need to have that conversation at a cultural level as well. I actually think we need maybe a public bank in Massachusetts. So money has to be less expensive than it is commercially. So there have to be options for those small business owners not to have to buy money at commercial rates, at commercial lending rates. There have to, for property owners to be able to do the same. We can figure out kind of what the public purpose of that capital is so that we subsidize it, but I don't think that we can stimulate economic growth, especially for folks that we've excluded from the economy, by asking them to pay the commercial premium for money. It's just too costly, and that's not the right starting point.
And those are layers of reparations, to your point. And reparative ways of thinking about how we get cheaper capital back to our people for doing different innovative things.
Could I just add this? I think that, like what the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is doing with these community land trusts, like that's really, we can be expanding things like that. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
The Boston Ujima Project. Is Ujima here? All right. I hope that was somebody who was here, but just real quickly, the commercial for the Boston Ujima Project, a membership-based investment network that is investing in the growth of businesses in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. For $50 or more, you can become a member of this network that is investing in business growth from which you get a return. that's an easy way to kind of step into, I would say, purposeful investment, not just investment to see if your shares of Apple and Tesla go up, but it's to make sure that City Fresh performs and does what it wants to do for your community.
All right, we're being prompted to take a few audience questions, which I have some up here, and if anyone wrote any on cards, if you want to wave them in the air, someone will come and pick them up. I know we're already running a little late, but we want to take a few more questions. And one of those is about, going back to business owners, someone says, what are the biggest structural barriers preventing Black entrepreneurs from opening and sustaining brick and mortar shops? So I wonder if you guys had any further thoughts about that.
That's Glenn Lloyd's expertise.
No. No. Well, just for those who are maybe already running a business in this, in this audience, who are thinking about running a business, and so I'm on the other side of the table sometimes of like, how do we get capital out? And a couple of things I'd just say quickly is, one of the most important things we look at is cash flow, right? And trying to predict what your cash flow is going to be moving out. So so how do you prepare yourself to be able to have a positive response when that's coming your way, when you're seeking investment capital, whether it be debt, or whether it be equity? And there's obviously other parts of how you can confirm or you can persuade the fact that we think this predictive cash flow is real, and that has to do with some of your track record, your experience, your product and service. So I'll just summarize quickly, which is, when you think about business is hard because there's a lot of things you can get wrong, and versus like real estate investment, which is it's a lot more cookie cutter and formulaic. And when you come into the business world, you really want to make sure that you understand your product and service, you understand your market, you understand your value proposition, and you understand your numbers and your finances, right? Because no matter who you're looking at on the investment side, they're going to be looking at those fundamentals. And then to Ron Dorsey, Ron D, I'll call it, to my right over here, I do think there's policy that can help support our business owners, because here's the deal. It's not a level playing field, right, for our folks. And so we got to figure out how we leverage policy and resources to make that more leveling playing field, whether it be lower cost capital, whether it be access to loan loss, where we're risk mitigating some of these deals, or providing technical assistance. I don't like the word technical assistance, but advisory, high-touch advisory support in a way that's going to increase your chance of success. Because here's the deal. The other thing I'm just going to quickly say is, what we don't talk a lot about, two things we don't talk a lot about. We don't talk a lot about the 1% and how there's a feedback loop that supports their ability to continue to hoard wealth, right? Generationally, right? And some of us has been in those rooms. I'm like, what? And I could tell you stories about that stuff, which is like, you don't even realize the privilege that you have. It's like the water that you're swimming in. You don't even know the water that you're swimming in. And so we have to understand those behaviors and pull back. And some of those behaviors include what I call resource networks, meaning folks can get on the phone in certain networks and make that phone call around talent, capital, customers, right? And what we've tried to do, and Ron's been a part of this too, and a lot of folks who in the small business world, we try to almost mimic those ecosystems, so we have those same types of resource network on our side on the equation, right? But it gets back to that historical thing. There's been a break, and we don't have that same access in a lot of ways. And so part of what we do is, like, first off, we need to take that access, right, from the resource networks, and then we got to create our own. And so that's me going a little bit off on the small business side, but I think that would be,
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And Lorna, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you mentioned cooperative lending circles, which I think is really interesting and would be good in this context.
Yeah, well, there's a great group in East Boston, Luz Zambrano, just giving a shout out to her group, where they're doing like cooperative businesses. There's several businesses, a childcare, like carpentry with, upholstery and furniture, but there's like 5 businesses, and they're all owned by immigrants. They share the resources, like it's kind of like a micro lending, where they will share with the lawyer, to pool their resources together. They'll have somebody who can do the HR part, the human resources. So there's cooperative models like this that, right, they've been done in other parts of the world. We call it micro-lending, but we can do that also. We have models of cooperative housing like in JP, and there's so many of these cooperative economics, but we still continue, right, to look at this very individualistically, right? And so I just think there's a lot of potential, and I think that like what's happening in East Boston with some of our, Colombian cooperatives, it's really, there's a lot of potential there that we could replicate in other communities.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It's really smart. Ron, I'm glad you came back. I don't know where you went, but thanks for joining us. So this question is a good one for you. This person says, how do we keep this conversation going after tonight to continue to work toward making economic progress in our communities?
Yes, as I mentioned, we're going to have ongoing workshops. We're going to have conversations based on funding, and I'm not going to look to my brother to my left. And we're going to bring in financial experts from around the country, those that are locally. We're going to ask local business owners, for those who sent us a nice little email, we're going to have local business owners tell us about how they made it in their life and share some of their experiences. Just like we did with the Globe. The Globe actually went through a conversation. And, sometimes you think, again, you can't judge a book by its cover because, I thought the reporters get big money, but, it's like, well,
Good one.
y'all just like us, And that's what we really try to portray with this project. It's not like us and them, it's we. We're in this together, and I think that's important to recognize that.
Okay, great. Well, I know we're running a little over. Do you guys have anything else you want to add? I know we didn't get to many questions we were going to talk about. If there was any particular you want to bring up? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just want to say that, I'm really, with this new proposal for the high school standards, that financial literacy will be required. So that's huge. I hope that part passes.
No, I was so glad to hear that. Well, that's your world, man. Education. You want to take us home?
Take us home.
Sure. Maybe I will pick up on your we, because I don't want us to leave the room kind of thinking that we are the objects of systems and the subjects of systems. We've got a lot more power than sometimes we leverage. Part of that power is just being declarative about what it is we want for ourselves, our families, and our community. And that's going to take some family conversations like this one to really figure out what that expression is. I will tell you, the next huge opportunity, I think, for all of us at a number of levels is Nubian Square. So this is a part of Boston that is more investable than it has ever been. And there's a lot of good work being led by entrepreneurs and leaders of color to do this work. Franklin Cummings is coming to the square. Jazz Urbane, Jean Apollon, Haley House is coming back to the square. A lot of stuff that we've wanted for ourselves, led by us, that now we've got to figure out how to support, but I think that there is also a collective effort to make sure, how is this going to democratize the prosperity that I know will come from this? And so this is a conversation that we have, because this is about policy on the one end. So one, how do we make sure that it all happens? Because if you've been here long enough, you've heard about the coming prosperity and what was Dudley, now Nubian, probably several times over. So how do we make sure that it happens this time? I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of the folks who are taking on these projects. One, developers are showing up for them, which is great. They're building these buildings and saying, I want you to be here, and actually I'm gonna give you a break on the lease. It's gonna be sub-market and some other things. But here's challenge number one. Gave you a break, good deal. Now you've got to build this thing. I don't know any of the leaders who have to come up with less than about $2 million to build. That takes the kind of capital that Glenn was talking about. That takes investment. So now we have to figure out, where is this coming from? Actually, it sounds like a lot, but when you think about the 5 to 10 ventures that may be coming to the square, add it up and it's about $25, $30 million that would go a long way. Actually, in the scope of Boston's economy, $30 million is a pittance. We can do that, but there is still this thing about the trust divide. Does the rest of Boston want to invest in Nubian Square? Do we want to make sure that we show up for one another to make sure Nubian Square happens? I'm gonna tell you, family, it's going to be remarkable, I think, in 5 years. And if we do this the right way, it is going to be to all of our benefits.
Excellent. Good. Well, that's a great place to end. Thank you all to our panelists. This was very enlightening. Thank you to all of you. And there's a reception upstairs that everyone is invited to. So I hope you all will join us. And thanks so much for coming.